Our first speaker is Judge Travis Moore. If you would make your way up, and the steps are right over here. Give him a round of applause, everybody. Now, I'm just meeting Judge Moore for the first time today, and I don't know a heck of a lot about him, so I don't have a bio to give. But I will say that he has recently been elected by his peers across the state as president of the Probate Judges Association, or whatever the formal name is, in South Carolina. So to have our Greenwood guy leading the charge is pretty cool. So welcome, Judge Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I wasn't nervous until he spoke, and he's so dynamic. I'm like, man, how do I follow that? That's awesome. I appreciate the invitation to be here, and it's great to be with all of you folks. And I came in, I thought I would see some people I know, and I've seen a few people. I know Floyd, obviously, he's a neighbor and good friend. I know Carl from the theater, and but looking around, there's not a whole lot of people that I know. So I know two things when it comes to public speaking. I need to keep it short. I need to keep it simple. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. The two things I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about myself, just because I don't know y'all and y'all don't know me, so I want to introduce myself. And then I'm going to tell you what the Office of Probate Court does, because when this was a contested election in 2010, the biggest question I got was, well, two questions. Number one, we vote on probate judge? Yes, you do. And then number two, what do you do at probate court? So we'll answer those questions. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Greenwood, graduated in 1986 from Greenwood High School. And my mother's here today, by the way, in case I don't say anything that's right, she can keep me in line. So I was glad she came with me. I graduated in 1986, and as I heard one politician say, that I was not the best high school student. I was not at the bottom of the class, but I could see it. That was me. My lifelong goal was to be a disc jockey, because that's the way I made my way through high school and college and practicing law, and sometimes as probate judge. I still have my equipment, still spin the records. So that's what I wanted to do for my life when I was in 11th grade. And when I told my dad that, Dad, I think I'm just going to go to Piedmont Tech maybe and be a disc jockey, I remember his words were, good luck. And that scared me. Quick little story. When I was in 11th grade, my dad, who is a lot different than me, a lot of people think we're very similar because he too was a judge. He didn't have the interest I had in extracurricular activities. He was not into the music scene. He was not into golf. He was not into sports unless it was Duke basketball. But anyway, he was just focused on his work, and he didn't know a lot about the stuff I was interested in. But this morning, in 11th grade, I was sitting at the table, and he said, I'm holding court today in Aiken County. And he said, I'm about to leave, and it's some musician that I hadn't heard of, and I'm taking his guilty plea this morning. I said, well, who is it, Dad? And he said, let me think of his name. And my mother can tell you this is true. He didn't have a clue. He goes, his last name's Brown. James? James Brown? I said, Dad, you're about to sentence James Brown? And I said, that's the godfather of soul. And he said, well, yeah, he's pleading guilty this morning. I'm like, well, yeah, I normally don't skip school, but I got to skip school to meet James Brown. And my mom and dad allowed me to skip school that day. And I don't know if it's skipping school when you get parental consent. But anyway, I went to Aiken with my dad and met James Brown. He was late to court because he was getting his hair fixed in prison. And that's true. And so we had to wait 15 minutes because he was in jail with his hairdresser, and he came over and he pled guilty, and that's another story I'll be glad to tell you about later. But after it was over, he came back to the judge's chambers, and I met him. I got to shake his hand, and he sent me an autobiography, a vinyl record, and a handwritten note that said, Dear Travis, stay in school, James Brown. And I took Mr. Brown's advice, and I stayed in school and did not chase the DJ dream, although I guess I'm still chasing it maybe. But I went on to Anderson Junior College and got an associate's degree in broadcast journalism, because that was kind of like what DJs do. Wound up going to Furman University, majored in political science because that was what I enjoyed, but it also allowed me to graduate the quickest. And then my very last class, I took constitutional law. I needed one class to graduate, And it was my senior year, last class. I'm like, wow, I might pursue this law thing. Who knew? So that's how I got interested in the law, and I practiced law for 17 years and then became a probate judge. I ran in 2010 as a Democrat and won, and I've been holding that position since. Probate court is interesting for a couple different reasons. Number one, it's the one and only judgeship where it's both administrative as well as conducting legal proceedings. I am a department head for the county, run the probate court, so there's a lot of administration that goes in that. I have a lot of files, we deal with a lot of families, so there is that aspect of being a judge. We just don't show up and hold court every day like a lot of judges do in family court or circuit court. And this is the only judgeship that is elected by the people. So this is the only judgeship that you, the citizens, get to select every 4 years. We're on the ballot. And it's also partisan. And that's kind of an odd thing, because when you think of a judge, you think as fair, independent, and you don't want a judge aligning with any party. What people want coming into a courtroom is somebody who's not going to be aligned with either party. You want fairness. Both sides deserve that. So even though it is partisan, after the election, it is unethical to be involved with any party politics. And that's why you don't see me a lot at these breakfasts, because once you do declare for a party, but then once that's over, I cannot align. It's against the rules of professional conduct to be aligned with the party and to do those sorts of functions. So you have to be very, very careful. So that's an interesting fact about it. And this is the only court that you don't actually have to get in trouble to come to court. If you live long enough, President Obama just fell. This is the only court that if you live long enough and stay in Greenwood County, you will come through our doors at the Greenwood County Courthouse in one form or fashion, because we help the people through very difficult times. And that's going to lead me to what we do. And then I'll keep it brief and I'll open it up for some questions. What we do is we do several things. The first thing is we help people probate their estates of their loved ones. When you have a loved one pass away, most people, when they have that position, be like, "Ooh, I've never done this before." They come to our court and we help them through that process. We talk with the families, we tell them what they need to do, what documents they need to gather, and we look at the will. We make sure that the will is proper, and a lot of times there's not a will. And so it kind of can get tricky. And as you know, with families, as every family out there, when somebody passes away, it can get kind of hairy. And so we walk them through that process. I heard a law school professor at a conference a few weeks ago. He said, being a probate judge is like being a veterinarian. And it kind of took me aback. And he said, you know, when a veterinarian has to, when a dog or a cat comes to and is on their table, they're like, well, something's bothering this cat or dog, and the dog or cat can't talk. They've got to figure it out without having the dog or cat tell them what's going on. Same thing with when you look at a will, where you're trying to figure out what this person meant when they wrote this will, who has now passed away. You're trying to read their mind as to what does this word mean? What does this sentence mean? This cousin thinks it means this. This cousin thinks it means that. So it's kind of like being a veterinarian. I'd never thought about that, but it's true. Trying to read people's minds. We also do guardianships and conservatorships. That means when somebody does not have a power of attorney, when somebody has not given someone the right to control their affairs, when dementia sets in, when there's a traumatic brain injury, when there's decisions to be made, if they have not given somebody that power, people come to our court and ask, what do I need to do? We see this a lot with COVID. People are on a ventilator. You know, last week they were fine. They go into self-regional, go on a ventilator. The spouse is coming to our court saying, I've got to pay bills. I don't have a power of attorney. We have a business and we need to pay employees. How can I access the checkbook? How can I access the bills? So our caseload has increased a lot, both with estates and guardianships and conservatorships. And again, those are tricky because when you're talking about who's going to control grandmama's checkbook, there can be fights there. So we deal with those things. We also deal with mental health and chemical dependency. When you have a loved one you think is going through a mental illness, when you are worried about that and they were refusing to seek help, you can go to Beckman Mental Health and they will call our court and we will do a detention order for the sheriff's deputies to come transport that person to self-regional for an evaluation. There's a whole process there, but we deal a lot with mental health. And again, the pandemic has played a big role in this area. And also chemical dependency. If you have a loved one who's on drugs, if you think that drugs are affecting their life, if you think they need help and they are refusing, we can try to get them help. It's not a perfect system, but it's what we have, and it is available to the public, and I'm always available to talk with anybody about that if you have any questions. I have also been appointed as the drug court judge and the veterans court judge. We had several veterans here, and it's a great diversionary program. When there is a veteran who finds themselves in legal trouble, they can plead guilty to their crime, but it will be dismissed if they go through this program. It's an 18-month program. You have a mentor. You meet with the court every 2 weeks. You have drug screens a couple times a week. You go through counseling. And if you successfully complete the program, the charges are dismissed. Same thing with drug court. Anybody who has if you're accepted in the program who has had a drug offense, they may be looking at 10 years in prison. But if there's a chance of recovery, it gives them incentive to, hey, I want to go through this program. And it's the solicitor's program, but I've been tasked with doing that, and I really enjoy that part of the job. And the one fun part that we do in probate court, despite all those things, we do marriage licenses. And so we get to see everybody that's going to live happily ever after. And that's really interesting to see who walks through the doors. And so we do that. Matter of fact, I just got married in July, and my wife's here with me, Allison, so she, you can clap. Yeah, I'll clap for that. Yeah. So I'm still a newlywed. It's 8 months in, and I'm still a newlywed. Like I say, we live right down the street from Floyd, so that's good. We saw him whizzing by on his bicycle. If you've ever seen Floyd Nicholson ride a bicycle, man, he took that turn sharp yesterday. I was watching him. He was getting it. And the one thing that the last thing that I'll say that probate court does, and when I took this job, I didn't know that we did this, but it's the public health judge. Like back in 2012, you remember there was a tuberculosis scare in '96. That it was made the news, and I had a phone call from DHEC saying that we need a detention order for a tuberculosis patient who was refusing to be quarantined. I'm like, well, why are you calling me? They're like, well, you're the public health judge. And I'm like, I am? And I called my probate court colleagues, and I said, is this true? Am I the public health judge? And like, yes. But we have never used that. We were the first probate court in the state to actually use that statute to have to quarantine someone, a tuberculosis patient, which was kind of new. So there's things that pop up, although I've been doing it for a while, that I didn't know that this job entails. So it's a job that I absolutely love. I love waking up each morning, going to work. It's something new every single day. It's a privilege to help the people of Greenwood. And it's just like any other public office. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I don't TikTok. I don't know what that is. But when people say, I've been trying to get in touch with you and can't, that just means, well, that you really didn't try, because I'm kind of out there sometimes too much. And there are ethical rules. I will say that if you have a current case in probate court, I cannot speak with you directly about it because I may be deciding the case. So it would not be fair to speak with you individually without all of the parties there. So a lot of times, even though I would love to speak with everybody, I would have to take a step back and have somebody from my office contact you and say that I cannot have a private conversation about an ongoing case. So I have those ethical obligations that I have to do as well. So I'm going to be quiet, and I want to entertain any questions y'all may have, whether it's about probate court or James Brown or anything like that.
And since we are recording this, I want to make sure that any questions asked are asked into the microphone so that the recording can pick it up. So any questions for Judge Moore?
We have been debating whether to have a trust or just a simple will. If we have a trust, does it have to go through probate?
Your estate would have to go through probate. So even if you do some good financial planning, some good estate planning, it would come through probate court. We deal with trust matters, and so it normally is filed. And I would encourage, if you have those type of questions, is to seek legal advice, because that's one disclaimer I forgot to say is I cannot give legal advice, even though I am a judge. I would say to talk with a lawyer, and there is some estate planning that you can do to avoid probate for certain items. But most of the time it would be going through probate even if you do that. So a lot of times there's a testamentary trust, which means like within the will document it says we have a trust created, and so it can be done in the will. There's different kind of trust, but that's a good question. Very good question.
Any other questions?
And I do want to take this opportunity to say it's a very good idea if you don't have these documents to go ahead and get them done. Because a lot of people, you don't want to think that your time is coming soon, but we see people all day, every day that come in that didn't have the will, didn't have the power of attorney, and it kind of helps the family out to have some direction during those really tough times to give some clarity as to what is done. And it makes our job easier, but it's also very good for the family to have those documents.
Well, if I didn't feel my mortality before, I do now.
Yeah.
Round of applause for Judge Moore. Thank you so much for coming out and informing us. Great job. Thank you, sir.